everybody wait. All right, we'll call the order for the AFSCME contract. In the city of Louisville, Thursday, May 29th at 05. The next order of business is citizen comments, and see the citizens here are coming, so we'll just move right into item 2, which is the contract. And it's a courtesy of Laura, if you have an opening statement, or otherwise I'll ask Nikki for an opening statement, and then we'll just get into it.
Yeah, I sent over electronically our proposal this morning, so I don't know if you guys have had a chance to get that.
Nikki, any opening comment that you need to get through before we start putting in?
No. We could just,
You just
go
go
through it.
their list.
One more.
One more?
Yes.
That was even before.
I might be game. I thought I would feel way. You know what, that's a big mistake I make today.
Yeah.
Great, everybody else.
I'm gonna pass it down or just hold it.
Yeah, just hold
Thank you. I'll make sure.
on.
Anyone?
Oh, there. I'm sorry. Oh, there. Okay. He had to go get something off his desk, he said. I think he's gonna get his printout copy.
Yeah.
Of the agenda?
Oh, Carol just emailed us to have the YouTube videos. They're all.
Yeah, all the last 6 meetings should be YouTube public right now. So do you have a YouTube account? The city? Subscribe to the Zoom.
There's us. You guys got a good angle.
How's your backside?
I don't know. Jennifer's got it. Give her jacket always over Chris's. I feel like that's not bad.
It's like the work session room, they're always changing where those cameras are, or where they're angled at, and it's like, wait a minute, we're on camera now?
Now there's like one right.
We're back a couple more.
I know that place is Netflix, so. Maybe I can read that. Doing it wrong.
All right, Mom, look at anything you guys can't see. It's my minutes. So do you want us to go through the list, their proposal? Okay. Do you want me to do that? Okay. So I'll go through most of it, but I'm gonna have Jennifer talk about a few of the items you guys sent us.
Okay.
Okay, so for Article 5. You stated the union does not agree to at will. So for us, that's kind of a non-starter because that was the direction from city council. So,
Really not negotiable.
yeah. You guys had proposed that 30-day notice for proposed changes to the personnel policy. When we discussed that, we thought you guys had been okay with receiving it at the same time as council, which is usually a week before. 30 days is a little bit unreasonable, just because usually Nikki is making those edits up until about a week before the council meeting. So that would just delay being able to get it in front of council. So I don't know if you looked at the red line we sent yesterday, but that included that we would send it to you guys at the same time as council.
When we kind of worked on this, it was before that was received.
So are you guys okay with receiving it at the same time as council?
We'll discuss that and let you know.
Well, then one of the notes I have here is that,
Oh, yeah, we could
sending
also,
it to staff representative or council two representative. We just felt in our discussion that it's really not our responsibility to notify council two. We just feel like we have worked through the president. And if the president wants to send it on as your representation of him or them, we really just feel like that's a function of the board, not for the city. And that's generally how it works for our other unions as well.
Mhm.
They coordinate with their union representatives.
I'm gonna let Jennifer talk about Article 6. Okay.
So for the grievance procedure. So you're requesting from the city to propose ending all grievances with the mayor. You don't agree to remove the mediation arbitration to resolve grievances. Arbitration is only for contract implication disputes. Union does not qualify for arbitration for contract negotiations. Having mutual party reserve any interpretations of the contract creates fairness for both employees and the city. So, I mean, again, it's the position of the city that, and to clarify, I'm not acting as the lawyer, but the attorney and as a negotiating agent, so. This is not my legal opinion, this is my city negotiator side. As far as arbitration and following the Federal Mediation and Conciliation Service, I don't know if you've attempted contact with them recently, but they've pretty much been wiped out through Doge. Their offices have been closed, their website is dismantled, and so they're on bare minimum staff. I mean, at this point, it doesn't really make sense to continue, using them for anything on that basis because their livelihood and future is unknown at this point. Again, it's the preference of the city to maintain or to keep the decision maker at being the mayor. However, in working through some of this, you know, if there was to be some kind of mediation arbitration process, the city would prefer mediation and not include any references to arbitration or mediator arbiter. And that in proposing individuals to act as mediators to provide a list of 7, each parties will agree upon or compile a list of 7 names of regional mediators. And that the grievant will bear the cost of the mediator. Should either party request transcript of the hearing, the requesting party will also be responsible for bearing that cost, and that any decision based out of mediation will be non-binding. And then getting rid of the expedited mediation arbitration and conventional arbitration paragraphs, because in the city's experience, there's no such thing as expedited mediation arbitration. It still takes more than typically the 14 days that's contemplated, because once you work out everybody's schedules and travel arrangements, you're still well beyond that. So it would still provide a means of mediation, but, you know, the hopes is that the parties would be able to resolve that dispute before that time frame, without the need for a neutral third party, and if they're not able to, then the party they're requesting mediation would bear that cost.
Okay.
Article 9. So we had discussed language about, you know, if you voluntarily separate and then come back, that resets your seniority. So it looks like you guys were okay with that language.
Yes.
But we did add, an additional item in Article 9, Section 8, under loss of seniority, and what we sent over yesterday, about involuntary transfers. So involuntary transfers, so transfers due to performance concerns, discipline, and or in lieu of termination shall result in the loss of department and city seniority. So I don't know if you guys have had a chance to discuss that, or if you have any
We
questions.
haven't had a chance to discuss that portion of it yet.
Because up above, it does reference transfers in the article, but then it never talks about transfers again. So we wanted to add that
Or the, I'm sorry, I know.
in Article 9,
Page 10.
Article 9, Section 8.
That's,
So we added an item F. Involuntary transfers.
So if somebody is transferred because the city, i.e. the mayor or a couple of managers decide that, you know, one particular department might be, you know, heavy in employment and this other department needs help, and they say, hey, Ryan, we're gonna move you to wastewater. And I say, well, I don't really wanna go. And the city says, well, you gotta go, because this is what the city needs, and we have to do what's in the best interest of the city. Is that an involuntary transfer? I would lose my,
I don't know.
If you look at another.
Not based on how that's defined.
Yeah,
It doesn't apply.
it wouldn't, I don't think it would apply in that case. Cause this specifically calls
okay,
out.
and
performance
I
discipline.
literally read what it says. I'm
Yeah.
just saying, can that be coerced into,
I mean, we could add something else about transfers due to,
maybe I just have a problem with
Staffing?
involuntary.
Temporary
transfer,
staffing.
because it could happen.
I think that would be possible because the city always reserves the right to reorganize.
That's
Right,
correct.
say, well, we don't need 200 people, we need 100 people.
Right.
And do that. And so the 100 remaining people then have to go somewhere.
No, I understand that. Is that disciplinary though, or?
No,
No.
no, that's not this way. But here's the thing though, and you know, you can help us think this through because water plant is technical and wastewater is technical. I mean, streets too, but I'm gonna use that water and wastewater as an example. So if somebody, let's say Pat, said, well, we don't need streets anymore. So Pat gets transferred to the water department or the wastewater department. And so he's been here longer than anyone else. So he now becomes the senior person. And then the city says, yeah, well, we gotta cut 10 more people for whatever reason. So now we get rid of people that have the certs and the experience and everything. And now Pat's it.
Right.
And Pat would probably honestly say, I can't do this. I'm new to this. And so, so in that example, if we had that and Pat was senior, but then there had to be a change in the department, it wouldn't make sense to me from an operations standpoint to send the guy or gal down the road that has the expertise.
Right.
So, not that that's ever likely to happen, but I think this is where we just make sure that we understand what the language says.
Right.
But,
Can we maybe change involuntary transfers to disciplinary transfers? Because I think there are definitely a distinct difference.
I guess my concern under section B3 for department seniority, it defines that, you know, in that department, it's your seniority is your length of service in that one particular department. So would that not apply when you are involuntarily transferred, like you're referring to?
I would think it would, but it means then that now Pat is on the bottom of the total pole. And Pat has to be happy with that. That's just the way it is. You know, the other option is Pat says, well, I don't want to do that. I'm gonna go do something else with my life. But,
my question was, sorry, so a while back in there's a time that there was talk about, you know, closing the transfer station. And some of those guys had been placed in other departments. So like when they got transferred to those other departments, because there was a thought of downsizing, what I understand, they were just transferred, they got to keep their city seniority and all that, correct?
I think so.
Okay, but but not seniority within the department. Is that right? Is that how that worked?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah, but they were provided an option. They didn't have
Right.
to take it.
No, but I'm just saying. They were moved, they didn't lose any vacation, anything like that.
Mm-mm.
So that's what we're talking about. You wouldn't lose any of that because it.
So it's not like you would
City.
start over on your
Right,
vacation
yeah.
or your
No, so
pay scale would
but just
be different.
your seniority within the department would change.
but I think there's good reason for that because certainly everything you do has a safety component to it. And you could get somebody in there that is not skilled or trained and tries to, you know, flex their position a little bit and hurt
Yeah.
people that wouldn't be good.
I agree with that because It's just like if I move to streets, you don't want me to go up there and tell people how to drive every piece of equipment that I've never ran, you know, so.
But on that same note, that would be, to me, that is up to the supervisors to whether or not somebody is turned loose without proper training, no matter what department you're going to do. And so if management is allowing people who are not trained to do that.
Better not be.
Well, that's one thing, though. I mean, and that should be taking that safety part and stuff out of it. You know, because you're not going to send somebody out in a snowplow that's never been on slick roads in their life and expect them to do the job properly and safely. You know, so I mean, I would agree that, you know, I mean, I think the other deal covers it. You know, you got your city seniority, you've worked there that long and stuff. You've earned that right. Department, yes. You know, I mean, I can see that there, but if you lose that city seniority, what if there's another position someplace in the city that you could fit into?
Yeah, under section 7, it does say voluntary transfers from one department to another. You do require a new seniority date under department seniority.
Right. I just, to me, there's a difference between involuntary transfer, in other words, hey, we need you here.
Like a
Versus,
reassignment almost.
versus a disciplinary transfer. We just went through one of these and, you know, the option was take this or don't have a job.
Right.
That's a big difference between, hey, we need you to go help streets for
Okay.
a year or whatever the scenario.
I mean, I think we could probably change F to disciplinary transfers.
Yeah.
And then maybe add
How about reorganization?
something about transfers due to
City needs.
city needs and staffing.
Staffing needs, yeah, I think that's fair. Because I can see involuntary transfers happening that are not performance or disciplinary based. Probably as often as they are disciplinary based, honestly. I know in my past jobs, I've seen that happen. Just get shuffled around. They don't really have an option other than to quit and leave. They probably should lose everything because they're doing what's best for the city.
So would you guys prefer that they keep department seniority if they're transferred due to something like staffing? You'd want all their seniority to stay the same or not?
Or just city.
Yeah,
not department.
I believe the city.
Just city seniority,
the
but not
city,
their-
Because you can't have somebody come in over the people that are fully trained, like.
Yeah, I
The
mean,
mayor
we'll
was saying,
write
you
it,
know,
I think, how you guys prefer it, so.
Pat comes to work tomorrow at the water plant, I still get seniority for vacation, sorry, that's damn straight.
But you'll get laid off.
But I'll get laid off. See, yeah, then it becomes a disciplinary transfer. No,
Okay, we can probably. Okay, I'm gonna let Jennifer talk about Article 10.
So again, investigation by union representative. What exactly is the steward going to be investigating? Because I know what attempted to happen in the past, so what this says, and I'm just trying to better understand what the stewards and staff representative would be investigating.
payroll issues, safety issues,
Discipline.
discipline issues. I think anything where somebody from the union is contacted about an issue that maybe somebody's not comfortable going to the supervisor with, or has tried to go to their supervisor with no impact.
Okay, so because this says that you would be doing the investigation related to complaints on violations of the collective bargaining agreement. So a payroll issue in and of itself. I mean, what kind of issue would you think would that involve?
We would just want to ensure that myself or whoever replaces me in the future has the tools available in order to investigate any future discipline of an employee to make sure that we agree or not, or disagree with whatever discipline or action was taken. So I know in the most recent case, we had tried to ask for copies of the data that showed a prior discipline and it was not provided. So there was no way for us to verify that information. So that's what we want to ensure.
And is there a reason why you weren't able to obtain it through the employee? Because again, we've mentioned before, employee disciplinary records are considered confidential and exempt records under the Idaho Public Records Act. So we have an obligation to protect those records unless the employee provides written consent to release those records.
So the letter that was received did include the president, it said the data was included and it was not.
So did the president address that with the city?
We were all in the room together during this asking for that information, so that was an assumption, I guess, on our side. That the union, which I am part of, the employees are part of, were asking for that information and it was not provided.
Okay, and had the name of the stewards in compliance with the collective bargaining agreement been provided to the city?
That would have been me. So yes, the city would want whatever.
But according to the the collective bargaining agreement, did you submit the names of the stewards to the city for recognition prior to making that request? And my understanding is that the union has not regularly submitted the names of its stewards to the city to relate it specifically to the Article 10 investigations. And of those names, the Council 2 representative was not one of those stewards. Because you have your e-board and then you have your stewards.
Yes, our stewards are our. We're trying to clean that language up now.
I think what she's trying to say is like, for example, I didn't know that Morgan was a steward. I did not know that. I knew you were the president. I thought you were the secretary. So I think what she's trying to say is,
Use the treasurer.
no, he's the treasurer. So I think what she's trying to say is there hasn't been a list that the contract says there will be, like a name of who those 4 stewards are.
Morgan's new.
Yeah.
Well, we didn't know.
So that means that you have the obligation to notify the city of who your stewards are.
I'm aware of that.
So that when,
I'm aware of that.
when that request is made by Laura, the city has an obligation to comply with the collective bargaining agreement. Laura does not fall under that, so there was no requirement to provide it to her. But one of your stewards, who again, the list was not provided to the city to rely on.
Excuse me for a minute.
No, I'm still talking.
I know.
One of the list of the stewards was not provided, so in line with this, the city has to assume that the e-board are the stewards. And they could have requested it, but they didn't. It was Laura who was requesting it. So in complying.
Well, we were here
with
together. I think we were already.
Excuse me. Morgan, we did not even know we had to replace one of our e-board members until recently. We weren't made aware of the exact position of our other e-board member that was on there, other steward, had taken the job in management. And we hadn't been aware of what's going on with that position until we started negotiations.
But is
So
that
you
a
can't
city
put all the-
responsibility to make sure your union is aware of?
They should let us know if somebody has lost a union position.
Or that
Correct.
a union
The
issues.
city should let us
So-
know if we lose a union
Chris.
position.
Well, and I wasn't saying, I was just using that as an
Laura's
example.
trying to-
I was just using it as we're trying to
So-
attack it.
At that point in time, Morgan was not a steward in that discipline we were referencing. Yes, it was a misstep on our fault when that position left and Morgan replaced it. That notification has not been granted. I guess my concern is if Council 2 asks me as the sole representing agent for this contract, why am I not included? Why do I have to be listed as a steward?
Well, it's because that's what you've elected in your contract to say. But the other question too is, again, under the Idaho Public Records Law, as a public employer, we're required to keep disciplinary records exempt from public disclosure. Now, one of the concerns or one of the exceptions is when an employee, provides written consent to the release of those records. Traditionally, the city has treated that is that if a member, if an employee is a member of a bargaining unit, if, except for this particular one, 100% of those members are dues paying members. So we assume that they've provided consent to the union to represent them. Now, in the instance of this particular union where there's very low participation, we cannot imply that consent when almost 2/3 of your bargaining unit have not elected to pay dues and have AFSCME represent their interests. Now, it's a little bit different because I understand that AFSCME has to treat everybody the same and you have to represent everybody's interests. And you can't make a distinction between a dues paying and a non-dues paying. But that's your relationship with the employee, not the city's relationship with the employee. You can act as the bargaining agent, but there's concerns about whether or not these employees are actually consenting to the release of their records to AFSCME. If they're not electing to actually be a member of it.
And definitely going forward, I will have employees have that written consent. That, was a learning thing for me, and that's what I'm just trying to do with this language, is to correct that for any future items. It'll be handled, I'll get written consent, but I don't want that to, as the sole representing bargaining agent, be told I'm not allowed to have that information, whether I had that written consent or not. I mean, going forward, I will from now on have that written consent when requesting information. I just want to be able to get the information when a member does come to me, whether they're a dues paying member or not. We have to represent them because their job is covered under this contract.
And is there a reason why the employees who are this executive board are not able to represent the other employees in that nature? Because again, this agreement is supposed to govern the relationship between the city and its employees, and then, the bargaining unit, which is the union. So as the bargaining unit, is there a reason why the employees are not able to represent themselves in requesting information, on behalf of the union?
So to reference a statement you said in a prior meeting, why are they paying union dues if they can't have me help them do stuff?
Yeah, so why can't they help you? So they get the guidance and the training that they need, to do that. Instead of having you conduct it, I mean, they are a police union. If there's an issue between the city and a police member, the member is notified. The union is also notified, but it's not their fraternal order of police council, whatever. It is the union leadership. And then the city almost exclusively communicates with the union leadership, and there's no representation from the parent organization until something else is needed or legal representation is retained, at which point those members, they work in conjunction with the executive leaders, not in lieu of. So we're trying to figure out why the city is essentially being forced to have a relationship with AFSCME Council 2 and not its bargaining or not its executive board leadership.
I can't speak for how those other unions are structured. We have our own structure and protocol through Council 2, and that is how we do it. I'm here to help the local with those resources and get that information for them because they may not have time to do it while they're working. So it takes time from them doing their duties and jobs, and that's what I'm here for.
And I mean, and beyond this steward aspect, again, it's to investigate violations of the collective bargaining agreement. Is every potential disciplinary action between the city and an employee a violation of the collective bargaining agreement?
How do I verify that if I can't get the data to know that it is or is not?
Well, again, it's in which you believe to be in violation, so then everything that you would investigate would assume, would be assumed to be in violation of the collective bargaining agreement.
We're obligated to confirm or deny that.
I don't see that aspect, so you'd have to articulate what the violation of the collective bargaining agreement would be. Just mere disciplinary action, I mean. Then at that point, you would assume that every instance of discipline against an employee would be violated as collective bargaining.
No, I don't want to assume anything. That's why when, with my other jurisdictions, an incident or an employee contacts me of, hey, this happened. I want to get the other side because I know people are only gonna tell me a portion of the story. So I want to say, okay, let me get the facts first to see if you do have a case or not, or a point to take further.
But that doesn't seem to fall within the scope. The authority of the job steward, so designated by the union, shall be limited to and shall not exceed the investigation and presentation of complaints to the city's designated representative, which he or she believes to be in violation of the collective bargaining agreement.
And something like poor work performance wouldn't necessarily be in violation of the, how you process the disciplinary action, maybe, if it states that in here. But something like poor work performance isn't a violation of the contract. And even some investigative materials are not releasable. So even if there was an investigation, because there was a violation of this, some investigative material isn't just free to get out.
We just ask what is available. We ask.
Like if you conducted an investigation and we met with witnesses, you know, an investigation is confidential in nature. Those witnesses may not want people to know their statements.
Or if GPS data is being collected, there's not an obligation to release that information. Because again, that's considered confidential information and it's limited in who even has access to it. And depending on who conducts the investigation, it could even potentially be attorney work client privilege, attorney work product. There's a lot of different things that it could fall under. And there's no, when an employer, has an investigation against an employee, that in and of itself isn't going to be a violation of the collective bargaining agreement. So that's why we're asking, like, what do you believe the scope of this to be? When it says in here, it needs to be limited and shall not exceed investigation and presentation of complaints in which you believe to be a violation of the collective bargaining agreement. That's the language that's already in place. Okay. So just collecting disciplinary records without any other basis falls outside even the scope of the investigation by the union.
But I don't think we would want to have it more open
No,
than just what the collective bargaining agreement.
but as long as the union, is going to limit it to those alleged violations of the collective bargaining agreement, I think the city has already indicated that it's not against including the staff representative for that, but again, it does seem problematic that the union executive board itself is either not able to or unwilling to exercise that role as steward that is traditionally on the shoulders of the executive board. There's the leaders of the local union who know and the interests of and who can best represent the individual employees themselves.
Well, I appreciate your comments. We will revisit that, the caucus and then get back to you on that.
Can I say something about consent? At least the way that I understand it, or maybe my misunderstanding of it, but because our union's dues are taken out at payroll level, there's no secret of who pays dues and who doesn't. That's not true with fire. I don't think that's true with rules. That's done on a private level, not a city level. So if somebody walks into Nikki's office, she knows who pays dues and who doesn't within our union structure. So when it comes to consent, if we're sitting here in a disciplinary function, which I don't think I've ever sat in here in a disciplinary function with somebody who's not a dues paying member. They've just never, I've conferred with people on the phone before, but they've never asked us to go that far, knowing they aren't they are in the union. So, if we're sitting here with a particular employee or a certain employee, everybody in the room, I shouldn't say everybody, but most of us in the room know who has an implied consent. By being a dues paying member.
I just want to clarify, police and fire dues are taken out through payroll, just as that you can have a list of who paid dues and who doesn't.
That was, has that changed with fire? Because that's not what fire told me. What was that, Nikki?
Then they didn't tell you correctly.
Well, police and fire, their dues come out.
Yeah, they
Of
put
their
it together,
paycheck.
right?
Yeah, and then the reports
What they
provided
do
to
with
the
their
president
dues.
of their union.
What they do with them and where it goes and who does what with what, that's their own business, but
That's not the argument I'm making. I just-
yeah. No, I'm just trying to clarify, because
That's fine. I was told 3 years ago that the city did not know by name who was in the fire unit or not, because their dues were collected in-house, and not through the city.
We've always collected their dues.
yeah, be a paycheck.
And so what's the point of all that though? So the city.
The
would
point
know
was
who the dues
implying
payer
consent.
is? Yeah, well,
If you're
that's.
sitting here with somebody who pays dues, they've implied consent.
Yeah, that's what I said already.
Well, I think
That's what I'm
though,
saying.
I think though for a long
We'll
time,
know
Ryan,
who's paying, who's implied consent.
until last negotiations, I think we all were under the assumption that if they weren't paying dues, the union wasn't going to represent them. And it was clarified last time, when Steve was here, that that's not true, that being just a part of the union will represent you. And so that may not be known. I'm just saying, if people are contacting you, maybe they don't know they can. Yes, that's what I'm saying.
I think most people know that at this point.
It's just a comment. It's
No,
not-
that's fine, that's fine. I think maybe the expectation
Because-
from their side is different,
Yeah,
which it
We-
probably should be.
we were under the assumption that that's how people last. This was a section where, Mayor, did you want to talk about 2/3 of their union?
So a thought that I have, this is coming from somebody who is on the administrative side of things. I would like to put some kind of a statement in this contract so that in the future, when AFSCME would like to enter into collective bargaining, this will take some of the uncertainty out of the process for you. And what I'm asking you to consider is that we put a statement in there that for the city of Lewiston to recognize you, and this kind of gives you permission up front. At least it's goodwill. Permission up front. It's not statute, it won't be in statute, but it's at least in the contract. It says that if you have 2/3 of your members' positions that are covered by this contract that are actively paying and participating in the union, that I don't want to say that it gives you a free pass, but at least it sends to the council that we've got a very active and viable representative group here for the city to bargain with. And I think that does a couple of things. I think it puts the union leadership in a position where it's going to challenge you to talk about the benefits of being an active member of the union, a dues paying member of the union. Now, Laura said that she still has to represent everybody, whether they pay or not. But I think for a future city council, this kind of goes back a little bit to what Ryan said too. We don't know who the next mayor is gonna be, or we don't know who the next Ryan's gonna be, you know? But if you have something that says, okay, we're gonna be responsible about this, and we're gonna show the city that we're for real. And we've got, I'll do the numbers so I can do the math, 75 positions, and 50 of them are active. You know, dues paying is how I guess we measure that, but they're active in the union. They care about their jobs, they care about the union, they care about the city. That sends a strong message to the council that we are telling you then that we've reached this threshold. And now it almost becomes automatic. I
I can't say that it would be automatic, but it almost becomes automatic, because now you're signaling to the council, we're ready for business, we're open for business, because otherwise, every time this comes up, that you have 75 positions that are covered and you have 25, again, I'm using numbers that I can do the math on easily. And say, well, you've got 1/3 of these positions that are covered by this contract that, from all appearances, are interested in even what AFSCME does, you know. And future council is gonna ask that, they will. And future mayors will ask that. And so it's one way, I think, to maybe make a commitment back to the city that, yeah, we're here and we're viable, we're real, and we'd like to have you recognize us as such. But that would be incumbent upon you to to sell the benefits, and I know you'd want that. I mean, that would be a positive thing for you to have a little more active participation. The city would benefit by that too, because and I think we have, when I say we, I'm talking about generic, 10 years from now, when maybe none of us are here. Then the city kind of has that assurance too, and they know that, okay, this is going to be something that is worth our time and investment to go through this, because it represents, a very critical portion of our workforce. But having low numbers is just not a good look. And there can be reasons for it, whether it's new people or 6 months or whatever. I understand that. I'm just telling you that on this side of the table, it doesn't play well when we have to face that. So I think I would encourage you to do that. Yeah, this is not something that I thought of. So like the teachers union in the state of Idaho, to have the LEA represented, you have to have 50% plus one of the members sign on and say, yeah, we want this group to represent us. Otherwise, school district doesn't have to bargain. So they've got protections, but they don't. It's put on the union to make it happen. And that's in statute, so we're not talking about changing the statute, but certainly if you're trying to, I think, just my opinion, be a little bit more proactive and assertive, aggressive with the council a little bit, challenge yourself a little bit, put that in writing and go for it. And bring that back to the council, because I think it sent a very strong message. So you can think about that. You don't have to comment on it right now, but it's certainly something that when I visit with city personnel, because I sit in an elected office, these are the kind of questions or things that I ask, and I see that having been a legislator, and I've been through those discussions at the legislative level where we talk about whether or not to recognize groups like LEAs or the teachers in the state. So
When positions are they advertised as union positions within the city?
No.
No. So how does an employee who's applying for a job know that that's a union position or not?
We don't do that for.
Well,
any-
we have our labor unions all of our unions are listed on the city's website under our human resources. And then all the positions that qualify are there. And then assumedly, we have an e-board that reaches out to new employees to notify them of the union membership. So,
Yeah, and we did add language into our red line version that we sent that we would notify the union president when we hire a new person into a union position.
Yeah, I mean, it's
in a
not,
contract to, if somebody were to get on the city website and pull the policy up for the agreements, they can see what positions are covered by that.
yeah, and I guess my personal feelings is that that's your guys' responsibility to advocate for your union. Not necessarily our responsibility to do that work for you guys.
I just didn't know, are they aware that there's a contract out there that is a certain set of rules that could affect the job they're potentially taking?
Like Google search.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Everyone,
union page.
sometimes in interviews, the people will ask, and I'll be honest, I've had interviews where they feel both ways. Some are
Yeah,
like
you always will.
relieved that it would be a union position, and some are not happy that it would be a union position. So,
But even with fire and police, if we were to put a notice out, we don't on those notices, right? That is covered by FOP.
No.
It's just that we're hiring for police
Yeah.
officers or whatever.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I'm saying we don't do that for any of the.
Yeah. Okay, are we ready to move on from that?
I am.
Okay. So Article 11, I'm gonna jump down to your middle section. About the city proposed compensation time be paid out quarterly. Union has declined with concerns if an employee goes over the cap and has to wait until the next quarterly payout, would they potentially lose time? So no, that you would not be losing time. So right now, Carolyn does this every pay period. Anytime someone's over 120 on comp time, she's manually adjusting that to be paid as overtime. So she's doing it every 2 weeks.
So you're kind of already,
So
this would be the opposite of. what you're
yeah,
saying.
so this would actually allow you in between those quarters to accrue over 120. And then every quarter, anything over 120, she would pay out in overtime back down to 120. But no time would be lost.
Or below that if they requested more hours.
Yes.
So is there a way, we could change that language to at that quarterly cap, you can't go over 120?
Yeah, let me see what happens.
Because the sentence right
If we-
above before that is, it is understood that employee may not accumulate more than 120 hours.
You want to read like. per
We could
quarter?
probably,
Yeah, or can't carry over from quarter to quarter.
okay, I think I might have some language that might.
I mean, is that really necessary? What the city's proposed is that it's understood that an employee may not accumulate more than 120 hours compensatory time. Hours accumulated in excess of this maximum shall be paid out quarterly as overtime on the second pay date in December, second pay date in March, and second pay date June, and second pay date in September. So it doesn't say.
Yeah, that
anything-
language covers,
Yeah,
It doesn't say anything about losing it. You still can accumulate 120 compensatory hours, and then anything in excess will be paid out as overtime.
We'll discuss that further.
So does that help? But yeah, the intent is not that you would lose any.
And I assume that's what the intent was, but I just.
It would just
have
make it,
everything
and that was really a
clear.
request from payroll because it's very labor intensive for her to have to do that every 2
Imagine.
weeks.
for like an hour. or-
Yeah, so this would just,
well, and she's really doing what should be the supervisor's job, like they should be
yeah,
making.
supervisor should.
Because like,
sending back
they
time
should
records.
know what their employees' accruals are, and if somebody's trying to. Take comp time earned when they're at that limit. It should be kicked back to the employee to readjust their time to put it into overtime. But they're not doing that, so now Carolyn's doing this extra work. So this would just alleviate that from her, where she only has to do that work every quarter.
And really, it would kind of benefit you guys because you could accrue over 120 in between those.
Oh, yeah, I don't
And then use
think
it.
we have a problem with
No.
that. And then the quarterly thing, I think makes total sense.
Yeah.
That makes sense, but
I have a question about further, right at the starting of it, and actually a couple of spots throughout. And I just, for personal here, where you have his, her, now hers marked out. What is the purpose?
that was me. I marked out her everywhere because I think it's, I don't know, bulky. I mean.
I think it should probably be there.
But
I think it's right
if-
there.
If you have a female employee looking at that, what are they gonna think? That's my personal thought on it.
You know,
Most everything, anymore has his or her.
I think I put comments in there that we should not make that change.
Oh, okay.
And if we wanted
I
to
didn't see
not have that, his, her reference, it should be changed to there.
Or the employee, yeah.
Or the employee.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I mean, we,
I was just asking, I
Yeah.
thought maybe, you had a reason, I was just wondering.
yeah, I think the mayor tried to just kind of Declutter it.
Yeah,
the language. It's my understanding.
Yeah, I don't think we're opposed to, change it. to
Yeah, I mean, we
there.
obviously don't wanna like
Right
offend anybody or
No.
exclude anybody.
No.
Yeah.
well, and unfortunately, anymore, you never know.
Yeah.
Hurt feelings are pretty quick
Yeah.
and easy, and so that was,
I mean,
I didn't
no,
want that
I get
either.
it. Yeah, I get it.
Well, I think we added it in that way to be more.
Yeah.
inclusive. Anyway.
Okay,
Okay,
I've also seen
Can I
words like
cover-
S slash E.
I had a little star by that, and it wasn't for his or her. By that, the start of this page, I'm sorry. So
Like the top of Article
What
11?
section are you?
Yes, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Page, top of page 15. Right where we were.
Page what?
Well, I think our page numbers might be different.
Yeah.
Oh,
Are you looking at the top of Article 11?
Article 11, section 2, voluntary directed time off.
Okay,
Okay. I think I understand this, but I just want to make sure. Where an employee is required by his or her supervisor to work, required to work overtime, correct? Okay. In a week. So I'm required to work some overtime. The employee may take directed time off. So does that mean that the supervisor is saying in lieu, instead of making your 5 hours overtime that you stayed for on Friday or Monday, I want you to go home early on Friday?
Yeah.
Okay, so if it's directed time off, isn't that technically telling the employee that he's going home and not earning overtime?
Well, I mean, it does say the employee may, it doesn't say the employer may direct it. It's voluntary directed time off, so,
We took the volunteer out.
but may is discretionary, so the employee has the option.
yeah, I think if the employer requested it, it still gives the employee the ability to say no.
Okay, that's,
I was just thinking like.
thank you, that's what I was looking for. I didn't know if that was being, if the employee may, so the employee has the option, is what I'm saying.
That's what yeah, may, I mean, otherwise I'd say shall.
Yeah,
What if there's budgetary constraints?
I just, it sounds voluntary, but then it ends with if requested by the supervisor. So is the supervisor telling the employee he doesn't work?
well, that's why we took volunteer out, because it's like, well, is it the volunteering or is it requested by the supervisor? Like those kind of conflict.
I thought the intent was that if a supervisor needs to provide directed time off.
I mean, it's already in the overtime section, you have overtime. And then in lieu of overtime, they can take time off. And in lieu of time off, they can receive compensatory time. So it's all within the same section related to overtime.
Okay, I mean,
I think I know what you're saying, Ryan. You're asking if,
if
say,
it's directed time off, how can it be voluntary? I guess that's my question.
for example, you're saying if you were asked on Tuesday, say, work 5 hours over, and you did, so you worked that 5 hours. But on Friday, your supervisor says, well, you worked 5 hours on Monday, so you need to go home at 5 hours
You
early.
have to go home.
Yeah, that's what you're asking. I don't think that's this, I don't know.
Well, I want to make sure, is it voluntary or is it not?
I would say the option would be, you work your 5 hours over. And you can also, instead of getting overtime for that time, you can take the time off, you can get overtime, or you can get comp time.
You can take time off with your supervisor's approval.
Because you've already been required to work more than your scheduled 40 hours by including that 5 hours.
Okay.
And then you are adjusting your 40 hours to include that 5 by taking it off somewhere else in your work week.
I think what you're asking is, can they just
Can they say
demand
no?
you to go home? No,
Can they,
can't
yes,
say
they
you
can,
have
they
to.
force you to go home? So in other words, you're here till 5 o'clock on Friday, but so we don't get overtime, I'm making you go home early and you just aren't going to be able to finish your work.
I mean, I would say there's nothing in this section that says that the employer can make that choice. It's the employee's option.
Okay, so the if requested by the supervisor, I guess that's what I'm confused with. If the supervisor requests what?
Hey, do you wanna take time off? You've got 5 hours extra today, and do you wanna take that 5 hours off on Friday?
Okay, he's making the suggestion.
Yeah, well,
Okay.
I mean,
Yes.
he's giving you the option,
Yeah, okay.
because it's discretionary on the employee side, he could say, no, I'd rather take overtime.
Yeah.
Because that might affect their decision then of, well, then I'm not gonna have you do that 5 hours overtime,
Correct.
I'll see if I can find somebody else.
Correct, okay. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, because it could work the opposite too. We're like, hey, we're gonna need you at the end of the week to work a longer day. Would you rather take this,
You have a doctor's appointment on the schedule, you wanna take that time off instead of sick time or
Kind of like a
whatever,
flex week.
yeah.
Yeah, kind of.
Again, it's the employee's discretion, employee may, nothing about the employer.
Okay, so for the rest of Article 11 and Article 12, we proposed language that was in line with city council's direction. So I apologize for the abrasiveness of how this will sound, but I just want to make it really clear for everybody that that proposed language, again, was at council's direction. If you choose not to accept that language, that will be taken back to council by the mayor. And you may be risking them not having a contract. As those were clearly non-negotiable items for city council.
It really exceeds our authority to be able to then negotiate on it.
Would you like us to explain how we wrote it? Or does it read clear enough? In our proposal?
I mean, I think we understand your proposal.
Okay.
But we, like I said, we wrote contract language and made edits to the contract that were in line with how council wants it to be. And if you're not willing to accept that language as was provided, then I would say your contract isn't at risk of not being accepted by council.
It'll be up to council to decide.
So we don't necessarily feel, I mean, we'll talk about some of the other pays that you have listed further down. For Article 13 and 14, vacation and sick leave, and even Article 17, bereavement leave. We were just curious if you could explain what your concerns are about having it removed and just referring to the personnel policy.
I'm sorry.
Vacation.
For vacation, sick, and bereavement. We do understand that you guys want to clarify bereavement, which we are open to do in the personnel policy.
Yeah, we don't mind adding clarifying language to the personnel policy that says for death.
This
If that
morning-
wasn't already known.
This morning when I printed this, you're getting a
Mhm.
copy of. And I saw this was redlined vacation, Article 13 was redlined. And so it was like, I had to get a line and go to the personnel policy. And see if there was like,
There shouldn't be any differences.
okay, well, I mean, my point of view, I had to look.
Oh,
Right?
yeah.
Why,
Yeah,
you know, what are you changing this? Why are you taking it out? I didn't see any differences. So if we're taking it out just because the language in our contract is exactly the same as it reads in the personnel policy.
Yes.
Maximum accrual limits, hours paid, that kind of thing. That was that table I was sort of comparing to. Myself personally, I mean, I saw it was all redlined out and I'm like, well, what's the change? We're just taking it out because it mirrors it.
Correct.
But
Well,
then there-
And I wasn't sure, I've had a couple union employees come to me asking me about, I guess a rumor maybe about PTO in the city. And they were wanting to know if the city was going to change leave to PTO, and we're not having any conversations like that. And so I didn't know if that was the reason, is because maybe there was a concern that the city was going to change its vacation sick leave. You know, procedure or
Yeah.
policy, and that's.
Yeah,
that's
there's no
not anything-
Concerns this morning have nothing to do with whatever
Okay.
rumors going on there. I just saw the red line and thought, why is that red line?
And
Yeah,
and you know
yeah,
how like
exactly.
rumor mill goes, you know, but,
I never said
I
that.
just wasn't sure if it was
I know.
because of that.
Not myself against it, because my wife said it jobs and I know she doesn't like it that way. She hates it that way, so.
The PTO, or
Yeah,
the- yeah,
so-
yeah. Yeah, I mean, at least
Personal.
I haven't known anything from the city as entertaining that as being a change.
And that could be that we've had so many new people coming in from other entities and stuff, you know, they may have had it that way.
Yeah. I mean, we have a supervisor, I think, asked us about it.
Yeah, long-term employee asked us about it.
But no, so it's really just because it's a duplication and it just, creates what we consider to be kind of unnecessary excessive length in the contract. But there is currently no intent or plans to change any of those.
Yes.
And we understand that that's the intent, but in our side, having it locked into the contract guarantees that it won't change. And we understand that it's a risk we're willing to take if you do change the personnel policy and it increases. That is very well understood, but to protect it, because the personnel policy does change and could change multiple times. That was the direction of it.
Yeah, I think from our standpoint is we just found it unnecessary because it's just lengthening the contract of duplication and there isn't really any discussion on those sections and haven't been. If anything, I don't think we've, well, I can't speak for any future, but yeah, it's just unnecessary.
What all does it include in a personal policy manual?
Well, they're willing to take out workers' comp, family medical leave,
Military.
military leave, I think reasonable accommodation might be there, I'm not sure. But, cause those are just mimicking the personnel policy. But they don't wanna take out vacation, sick and bereavement, which also just mimic the personnel policy, so. And we're willing to, you know, if there needs to be clarification, because it's not already cleared up, we can put per death in the personnel policy. I mean, the directors are currently making edits to it right now. One chair, I was thinking one chair.
Oh, the one that's now.
That's hot, yeah.
Okay, but it sounds like we are good to move forward with removing workers' comp.
Yeah,
The
the
other
federal,
ones.
state programs.
Okay. So that brings us to Article 22.
All right.
Wait, so yeah, I'll flip forward here.
Sorry. Go back to Article 11,
What
article?
Article 11, sorry, there's a wording in here, I just wanna clarify. Section 4,
Thank you, Brad.
Standby?
Okay.
standby, yes. There's a sentence in here, I just want to make sure it's understood. When assigned to standby, at the very bottom of the page, when assigned to standby, an employee shall check out a cell phone
Oh,
for the standby assignment and shall respond within 30 minutes. I can tell you from my personal experience, shall, should not. Provided, if needed, a lot of people use their own cell phones for standby.
yeah.
So I don't think that needs to be a rule. I do not want to take home our iPhone that I don't know how to use and try to answer it in the middle of the night when I'm sleeping.
Cause are you guys like, you just forward the call out phone number to your
And
phone?
our own personal numbers on the call out.
Oh, okay. Cause I know some,
Yeah,
It'll call whoever you tell it to call.
oh, okay, cause I know some of the departments, they have a phone number, the call out phone number, and they just forward it to whoever's on call with that.
And I like distribution, I call their call out phone.
Yeah.
Some guys carry it, other guys just have it for their own
Yeah.
personal phone. So I just think it's an archaic sentence that doesn't probably need to be here anymore.
Can we change shall to may, because maybe someone doesn't.
Oh, yeah, because there are still people who use the call out phone, so yeah. It's still a thing, it's just not a thing with it. So,
I think shall respond within 30 minutes, I mean, that's
That-
still.
that's standard.
Yeah, like our department, we change back and forth so much and like traffic, you never know, you know, so that's why myself, I personally push to have the city cell phone. So that you know you're calling one number, no matter who's on call, they've got it, you know? And so, but that's the difference, you know, in the departments. I agree with that. Some people just don't get the other type phones and.
Or they just don't want to
Right.
carry two phones.
They don't want to carry two phones, or they just forward it now with the technology, they just forward
Yeah,
it.
call forwarding.
Yeah.
For a little guy, they just don't want anything city related on there.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. That's-
Yeah. Okay. Article 22. I gotta find it. The version we can have is page 39.
union proposals, page 24, cities is 18,
Article 22?
page numbers.
Oh, there's this one. Mine's on 39.
Mine's on
39.
Well, my mind printed it's page 18. So,
Okay, so you guys are proposing a COLA of 2.5% for this year, which I believe we're okay with, because that is my custodial COLA for everyone. But we would move it to a different section where you proposed it, we would probably remove all of section 1 as it currently is and make section 2 section 1.
Yeah, I noticed that when I was like, well, I had that down here, but then section 1 had the old one and.
Yeah, so how we have it is probably how we would leave it, which is under section 2, which would become section 1. If I had left over 1, each step will be increased by 2.5.
Mhm.
And then the COLA language, the range of 1 to 2.5%. And then you guys are also asking for a 1% market adjustment each year of the contract. That's correct.
Correct.
Yes, correctly. Okay. So I believe that is something we would still need to discuss.
That was your option, was that your option, your failure was?
Well, we adjusted it just for 1 year.
Oh,
For-
I'm sorry.
You're asking, yeah,
For one for
year.
each year.
Yeah, we wanted to take that adjustment.
No, I
and
missed it.
Spread it out, so it helped alleviate that initial cost, so it wasn't,
Mhm.
but it's middle.
Were you also, so like one of the options we proposed included moving positions, were you guys not wanting to do that and instead just do the 1% adjustments each year? And keep everyone on the grades they're on? Want to clarify.
So could you restate that for my benefit again, so I make sure that.
So they would like to keep their pay scale as is, as far as where positions are placed. And then the COLA that would be in line with the rest of the city, so 2.5 for this coming year, and then the range 1 to 2.5 for the next 2 years after that. And then also with a 1% market adjustment each year of the contract,
3.5. If it all.
at
stays.
max,
If-
yeah,
You guys,
2 to 3.5.
sorry, Laura, go ahead.
I said, we're not opposed to adjustments in the pay scale, but we also wanted to make sure every kind of buddy got something too. Cause just with everything, every position is a little low, but we're not opposed like for the laborers and the janitorial.
Yeah, I would.
It's one of
Those are your
those-
really lower paid
I
staff,
know.
do you guys really not wanna consider? I guess,
Like that's rest side, right?
I know, but that's-
I think at this point, they haven't considered it, so.
Yeah.
That's not what's on the table.
cause your 1% or your even 2.5 on those custodians and park laborers would be.
It's not much.
Yeah.
Okay. And then,
I need to ask a rhetorical question, but I'd be curious to know if, you would take that idea back to that group. I presume you have some of those that are members of the union.
We've talked to this group,
And that's
And they
the,
don't wanna increase their pay? They don't wanna move a grade?
to that group itself.
Like your custodians, your park laborers, they don't wanna move up a
Can't say
grade?
that.
Cause that's what we're talking about is movement.
Correct. So I said,
you took it to your AFSCME group,
you took it to the union members, yes,
a union meeting.
yes.
I guess my concern was that is to ask for the wage adjustment, keep the COLA the same and move those. Is that too much of an ask for the city?
I mean, if you don't put it before us, then you're not even giving us the option to consider it.
Okay, I can definitely send another follow-up with that adjustment on there then.
Okay.
Cause I would understand if you didn't wanna consider moving. I guess, I'm just saying, I think your custodians would probably
I
really appreciate
agree.
it to be. They don't get representation on this board, and I guess it's not really my job to advocate for their pay increases, but I think that.
Well, if it was on there to move them, plus it, but then if everybody else get that 1%, that'd be something to consider.
But you haven't proposed that.
I'm just saying,
I guess that I'm just
if you're wondering
putting it
why,
out there.
because I guess a lot of people that we talk to, certain departments feel that they're taking they're taking the city's responsibility of moving up the certain groups. It's coming to them to give up any kind of increase. That's the feedback we're getting.
Wait, say that again, sorry, I didn't understand.
Oh, I think I get what you're saying.
It's not
Like-
the, I think what Chris is saying, because we've talked about it, is we don't feel it's the union's responsibility to make the city a marketable place to apply for a job. It's our responsibility to try to get people who work for the city decent pay and decent benefits, what we fight for, that's why we exist. But to say, hey, you know what, we really need to start our janitorial staff at a higher rate of pay. I totally agree, we all agree. But in lieu of current employees taking a hit or not getting a pay increase that they were hoping for or deserve after years of service, we just feel that we have to stand on one side or the other, and our side is we're staying with the employees who work for the city, not employees who choose to come to work for the city and lower.
That answers my question.
So it wasn't listed in here in your list, but we had added, when it comes to paying for training, travel and fees, that it would be subject to available funds, and you don't agree with that. I mean, I know you have a note that you would be concerned that then it'd be held liable or disciplined if they didn't get training. But I think that's more just like a safeguard for us that if we couldn't for some reason send someone, I mean, if they have to have it for the job,
Well,
they're gonna get it.
and that kind of threw up a red flag to me, because if you also refer back to Article 7, Section 2, if you do not have your certifications, you can be terminated. States right in Article 7, Section 2.
Well,
So if,
sure, but we're not gonna hire someone and then withhold training to fire them.
Don't get.
I mean, that
it doesn't state that.
makes any sense.
And that's what we hear about everything on our side, is it doesn't state that you will not be fired if the city does not have funds to get you your training.
Okay.
So, yeah, a sentence in there.
You know, something stating, you know, that if it's due to city funds not available.
I think the city is obligated to have that.
I guess I think the intent was more for like, there are trainings that are helpful for maintaining your certifications, but
Maybe we just had a clarification on that.
Yeah.
Or something added to it.
Required training
And we
versus,
well,
we had this discussion about the other department who were not being properly trained because they did not have funds.
mhm.
So, you know, I mean, it's happening, you know, but it states in your deal that in Article 7, Section 2, that you can be terminated if you do not have your certifications current.
Right.
I don't know if
So to me, it's in
necessarily
conflict.
Said that what the city proposed is when an employee fails to maintain job certification requirements or when work is unsatisfactory, he or she will receive written notification from their supervisor and a copy will be sent to the union representative, union steward, mayor, and department manager. Employees are at will and may be discharged without notice. So I don't see that language that you're talking about.
Well,
Fails to maintain job certification requirements.
When the employee.
May be discharged.
when the
Yeah, but I think that's when the employee fails, so if you say,
If
we're sending you
if
to
get yelled at
Spokane
sometimes,
to do
you
this
can't pass.
practical, and you're like, oh, I can't go, I've got a whatever. They find an alternate date for you, and, oh, I can't go, and that's this point, you're expired.
yeah,
From our-
or they
like-
will, in the DUI, you lose your CDL. Water, wastewater operators, we can lose our license for felonies, they can choose whether or not you go for the board.
Yeah, those are
for
more at
DUI.
fault.
That's,
employee
that
fault.
is the employee's fault of losing theirs, I don't.
Yeah,
And again,
Right.
it doesn't say anything about the employer, so if the employee hasn't maintained their job certification requirements due to the fault of the city, then I wouldn't say that that's an employee failure to maintain, it's the employer's failure to provide that training or, because it also says in this contract that the city will provide those training and certification. So that would be a failure on the city side, not necessarily, not an employee failure.
Yeah, if you guys just wanna propose something that clarifies that.
I think what.
Whenever an
Feel like it
employee,
clarifies it.
whenever an employee fails to maintain job certification requirements, or when work is unsatisfactory, they will receive written notification from their supervisor and a copy will be sent to the union representative, union steward, mayor, and department manager. That's what it says.
I guess my concern with that is, those certs are in the employee's name, so water treatment, that's their physical cert, their name on it. You know, could it possibly in the future, if it was for a budget concern and loses a cert? So, That's what
I
we're
think
proposing.
if it's that kind of budget concern, then, I mean, I would assume the department is also looking at cutting the position itself. I mean, because if they can't maintain the required certifications for the employee, then how can they even maintain the employee?
well, it's currently happening in traffic.
Well,
Yeah,
can I ask clarifying? So I don't know that we talked about this earlier when we were talking about that issue. So you're saying it's not because the training's not available, it's because they can't pay for it?
they're being told that the city does not have the money to send them to that training.
Do you
With
realize how much
employees.
the training costs?
But the cost of a person's life, because they're reaching their hands into an electrical box without proper training, which is more,
And is it actual like job required training,
Yes.
or is it job like preferred training?
well, it's either that or the city can hire an electrical outfit to come and work on all their streetlights.
Again, I think that there might be some discrepancy about required versus preferred. For some of that.
I mean, to me, I would think the city would require them to be trained to save the city the chance of somebody being killed and have to pay it, let alone if they do something wrong in that box and start a fire. These people have no training other than somebody that wasn't professionally trained anyway, showing them what to do.
That's something I can follow up with.
Yeah, and I would say, I can look into it, I just needed to clarify because I don't think that. we
Yeah,
talked about that.
I did actually have a conversation with Gene about that.
Yeah, I'd say
Okay.
Gene's,
Yeah.
he's aware, we know.
So
Yeah,
that's
we
a
can look
specific
into
thing
it.
we can look into.
And this is just a story. This is never, until last negotiation, was this even an issue. But last negotiation, it became, we just wanted it in writing. Remember that. I'm aware of two municipalities in Wyoming where I came from, where they had some budget issues for a couple of years, for some illegal practices. Water and wastewater operators were required for 3, maybe 4 years. The city would not send them to any training. And I only know this because we'd go to a conference to get our hours, our continuing education hours. And I would talk to those employees and they were staying in campers in parking lots because were having to pay for it themselves. No surprise, most of them were actively looking for other jobs at other municipalities because the city just basically said, we have all these lawsuits against us and we can't afford to send you. Well, my license is in my name and that's my livelihood, whether I work for the city of Lewiston or I work for, Spokane. That's my license. And I bring my license. When I got hired here, I was hired because I held that license. But there are situations, there are instances where this happens. And believe it or not, this discussion is huge on our side. If you have a certification, trust me, you do not just lackadaisically say, oh gosh, it lapsed. I think the state of Idaho just recently gave you a 3-month window. If your license lapse, there was a push for a while, probably 10, 15 years ago, that if you lost a license, being a level 4, you had to start all the way back at level 1 and work your way back up. Well, it took them about a year to figure out that you don't punish people that way because of extenuating circumstances that they aren't always in charge. So that has been relaxed a little bit. Idaho went to a 3-month window, I think, if a license lapse, you have 3 months to renew it. That grace period. But this is a real thing on our side. I mean, this is something we look at, not monthly, but definitely when it becomes your birth month, when we have to renew, well, your I's better be dotted and your T's better be crossed. Sometimes they are, just sometimes they aren't. I ran into that situation a couple of years ago and I desperately needed to go to a class. And luckily I was able to get an online class and I took care of it. It wasn't a cheap class by any means. My supervisor, my manager actually said, just get it scheduled. I was shocked at how expensive it was, but it was nice. I did it in about an 8-hour day and I was able to do without any travel expenses or anything like that. Not always available and ridiculously kind of expensive for what it is, but they know it's required, they know you have to have it, so.
Well, I mean, I think that helps clarify your concerns and maybe we can talk about that more. I just wanted to bring that up. You guys also added, so the CDL, obtaining a CDL, and then if you separate, required to reimburse the city. We very much appreciate you guys proposing that language. However, we're not really concerned about having it in the contract. I think Jennifer is working on a potential citywide policy. If I'm understanding, but
Yes and no.
we're investigating whether or not that's something the city really wants to move forward. So we appreciate that you guys were proactive about that, but we don't feel the need to have that in your.
And the reason for that is, you know, with the CDL specifically, where we have employees who are residents of Washington, they have to get a Washington CDL even to operate in Idaho. And, you know, looking at that cost, some estimates, including the cost of the certification, the training and the travel, it estimates up to $15,000. So a separating employee, that's probably gonna be more than your paycheck, and how you would want to make arrangements to reimburse the city for a cost of that nature. I mean, that's not really a burden that many people can easily carry. So there's consideration that still needs to go into, you know, having a requirement such as that, is that even feasible? And what if you're at, you know, instead of 24 months, you're at month 22, and you don't meet the 2 years, now you owe the city that full amount back? I mean.
Yeah, it would just be more complicated
Yeah,
than
that's not,
this, so.
Like usually it's prorated.
Yeah, I have some
that's
that
not what you
prorate it,
proposed.
there's some that just do the flat
Right.
year.
Yeah.
Well,
I just know that was a concern.
So,
brought
Again,
forward.
like we appreciate you guys suggesting that, but we don't feel the need.
But I think it's just mostly, you know, we was looking at people coming and going, because we don't like to have to keep retraining people either. You know, so that was kind of the deal, maybe getting to stay, but if you're working on something, I mean, that's
Yeah,
that's good.
There's more people, I mean, even, I understand the certification and the continuous training, I have those. Sometimes they're cheap, sometimes they're expensive, my licensing is expensive, it's my name too, so, you know, there's a lot to it.
And
and
say
then-
this may take that into consideration to hire, not to hire. So if we've got somebody who's interviewing, they don't have that CDL, even if they're good at making, you know, other things, not like, hey, it might be, no, we're not gonna do that, so. And push it back on the market.
and then lastly, you guys proposed longevity pay. We understand your reasoning for requesting that, but that's not something we're willing to consider. And then drug-free workplace, and then discipline, I think we're still sticking to just the city's current disciplinary process and the personal policy, not adding a separate disciplinary process to the contract. That wraps up that. Okay.
1 minute, please. Are you ready to stop recording? Mayor?
You guys will only till 11:30.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have any additional questions.
Well, do we wanna talk about
What happens next?
Yeah.
So there's an executive session with the city council scheduled for later this afternoon. I believe the mayor had originally pointed out, I think it's in the ground rules, but, you know, the intent was to try to have everything wrapped up by May 30th, which is tomorrow, and I don't, you know, we're not there yet. We don't have a final agreement, and we're not fine tuning a final agreement still. There's, I would say, a long ways to go. But you know, the city staff negotiating team will be having a conversation with the city council to see about what their preference is for moving forward.
So I guess maybe we have that executive session and then follow up, after that with the union. You guys.
I don't know how else to go about it. That's what we
Council decided to do. All right.
Great, we can adjourn the meeting?
Yeah.
Okay, meeting adjourned.